Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard School and Community Projects Coordinator. I'm delighted that you could be here tonight. I had the pleasure of listening to Sasha this afternoon, and I know that we are in for a treat. And I might even suggest take a minute and tweet someone or take a minute to call someone. This really is such an important presentation. It can truly make a difference in your child. So I welcome you. And as you know, we're always grateful to you for the gift of your time and attention. And we thank our sponsors like CASE who make this all possible. This format is a little different. Tonight, we're going to have 60 minutes with Sasha, talking more generally to all parents. And then there will be a 30-minute extended workshop to follow. And everyone's welcome. We'll be talking maybe a little bit more directed toward parents of neurodiverse children, but I think that this is valuable information for the next 90 minutes. Get a piece of paper and a pencil. And Sasha's been very kind about sharing her slides and this resource that we can show it again. So I'm very grateful to all of you and Sasha for that. Thank you. Quickly, let me tell you about what is upcoming in the next couple of weeks. I think November is a truly, truly unusual and very special month for the Glenbard Parent Series. Tomorrow night, The Power of Mindfulness to Increase Calm and Joy in Young Children with Dr. Shauna Shapiro. She'll be with us at noon and at 7 p.m. So let someone know. We always say everybody's welcome here. If you live across the street, if you live across the country, everyone's welcome. So tell your neighbors, tell your relatives that they're welcome here. The week following, we're going to bring back another one of our favorites, Ken Ginsberg, MD. He is with the Philadelphia Children's Hospital and the University of Pennsylvania. He's truly an expert on resilience. He'll be talking about his new book, Congratulations, You're Having a Teen, the guidebook you've always wanted and needed. It is a 2-hour presentation, and it's a strong one too. So circle that on your calendar. And then the following week, you're going to hear a program that I think every parent is interested in these days, update on social media and teen mental health. 2 experts from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Mitch Prinstein and Eva Telzer. They're going to be talking about this topic based on their research. Tuesday, November 14th, the Naperville City Hall is having a watch party organized by Kids Matter and the branch. That's happening at noon and at 7 p.m. So you can watch, hear a conversation afterwards, or again, listen online. And then another sort of unusual format, an important program on the 29th, Under the Influence, vaping, alcohol, and cannabis. We're going to watch a film at 11 a.m. at the College of DuPage, followed by a hybrid conversation with Tim Fong. He is an addiction psychiatrist from UCLA. Again, at 6 p.m., we're going to watch the film at 6 o'clock, and then the hybrid begins at 7. That's at Glenbard South on the 29th. So try to make one of those. We'd love to see you in person, but the hybrid's available. So lots going on this month and lots going on tonight. So I'm going to quickly turn it over to my friend, Mary Furbish. She's the director of CASE, the Special Ed Cooperative, who has the honor of introducing our special guest tonight. Take it away, Mary.
Thank you, Gilda. I am so happy to be introducing to all of you Sasha Long. Sasha is a BCBA and is the founder and president of the Autism Helper, Inc. She's a board certified behavior analyst and a former special education teacher. Sasha shares strategies and best practices through her blog, podcast, membership, and online courses. Sasha travels internationally as a speaker and consultant, providing individualized training and feedback to parents, educators, therapists, and administrators in the world of student challenges. She is a former adjunct professor at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. Sasha received her undergraduate degree in special education from Miami University and has a master's degree in applied behavior analysis from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. We are both honored and delighted to welcome Sasha Long to the GPS Parent Series tonight.
Thank you so much, Mary, and thank you everyone for having me tonight, for showing up on an evening. I know your time is really valuable, so I hope that you walk away today with some actionable strategies for your caseload, for your household. Thanks for that intro, Mary. As Mary said, I'm a former special education teacher and board certified behavior analyst. And our mission at the Autism Helper is really to bring strategies and solutions for teachers, clinicians, and parents that have children with autism, and really any child that is struggling to meet classroom expectations. That's really going to be the focus of our conversation tonight. If you're like, my gosh, my child, doesn't have autism. I don't have children with autism in my caseload. When I talk behavior, when I talk executive functions, it's to everyone, because these are strategies that we can really all apply. Any child that really is demonstrating these challenges is what we're going to be focusing on tonight. A little bit about today's session. So we're going to have that first hour be focused on can't do, won't do. This is like my must-have quick win framework. I almost shared this earlier today when I was doing the session at noon. I recently got asked by a school district to do a 30-minute session. And I mean, I talk fast, but 30 minutes is quick. And I was like, what can I do in 30 minutes? And I was like, can't do, won't do. Like, it's my go-to. It's a great framework for really approaching challenging behaviors in a way that leads you to strategies, doesn't leave you like, what should I do next? So that's what our first hour is going to be. The second component is going to be that half hour. We're going to go in depth into some executive function skill building strategies. So these will be more focused towards our neurodiverse learners, but really these are strategies, again, you can use with anyone. So that will be our second half an hour. I dropped a link in the chat that is your slides for today, as well as some downloads, because I think if you come to a workshop, you need a goodie bag. Like when you go to a party, you get a goodie bag. So a lot of the downloads and tools that you'll be seeing tonight are available in that Google Drive folder. 4 questions. I encourage you to drop your questions tonight in the chat. Don't feel like you're interrupting me. I might not answer you right away, but I'll see that question and I'll know to work it into the rest of our workshop. If you wait till the Q&A time, sometimes you forget your question and then later you're like, dang it, I should have asked that. Keep in mind when it comes to behavior, we don't want to give too many identifying information, anything like that. So just general questions or situations are perfect when it comes to behavior questions. So let's go ahead and pull my screen up. I will share the links one more time. All right, so tonight we're talking can't do or won't do. So our goal, whatever age our kids are at, whatever skill set our kids are at, whatever role we are in, is that our kids are learning, right? They're making academic progress. Our goal is that our kids are independent. Obviously, what that looks like for a 3-year-old is different than a 15-year-old, different than a 19-year-old. But we have different expectations and goals when it comes to independence. And then we want our kids to be engaged. We want them to be present in what they're doing, whether it's socializing, whether it's working, whether it's, homework, schoolwork, whatever that you're doing, we want them to be present and engaged and participating. Now, that doesn't come so easy, right? When it comes to the school setting, there's a lot of roadblocks for having kids being learning, independent, and engaged. In classrooms, there's a huge variety of skill sets, and I don't necessarily just mean academics. Really, what we'll be focusing on a lot tonight are executive functioning skills. And when we have such a big range of skills with executive functions in your household, in your classroom, that can be really challenging to make those appropriate accommodations. There's disruptive behaviors, whether that's your child doing the disruptive behaviors or someone else, that can take over and that can become a huge distraction for that child. And then there's big class sizes. Classes are understaffed. Things are tricky now in education, ensuring that our kids get the appropriate supports that they need. I want you to think for a minute about the expectations that your child is facing. Your child at school faces academic expectations. We have goals, we have standards, we have IEP goals maybe that we want them to achieve. Your kids in both school and home settings have social expectations. And those social expectations are constantly changing, constantly shifting. There are from, class period to class period, from school to home, the expectations change quite drastically on what we expect our students to accomplish. There are different goals for being independent. As we said, that looks different from a younger kid to an older kid, but we are constantly shifting what expectations we have for our kids to be independent. We want our kids to get home. We want them to start their homework. We want them to clean up after themselves, get to places on time. And then, of course, there's behavioral expectations on how we expect students to express their emotions and ask for things and self-advocate. When a child is not meeting expectations, when there's some disconnect between the expectations they are facing and the skills they are demonstrating, this can look a lot of different ways. This could look like shouting out. This could look like shutting down. This could be aggression. This could be like waiting for help at every turn. This could be academic regression. This could be a difficulty learning new skills. This could impact social skills and have a struggle to maintain friendships or an inability to start or finish independent tasks. Now, I could have relabeled this slide challenging behaviors, right? Or problem behaviors. And you all would have been like, oh yeah, problem behaviors. But the mindset shift is really important here. These are challenging behaviors, but they're also expressing and communicating an inability to meet those classroom expectations. It's communicating that disconnect, that something about the expectations and where I'm at right now is not jiving, is not working together. So think for a minute about what not meeting expectations looks like for you, for your child. What are your expectations in the evening right now? What about in the morning? What about after school? What about on Sunday? What are your expectations for your child? And what does it look like when your child's struggling to meet those expectations? Tonight, we're going to talk about the can't do or won't do framework for approaching situations when your kids are struggling to meet expectations. What I love about this framework is that it leads us to strategies right away. I found as a former teacher, as a BCBA, as a parent myself, I'm always hungry for the stuff, right? I like hearing about theory. That's all great, but I want the stuff. Like, what am I doing tomorrow, right? That's all great on how things are going and the background, but I need strategies. I need tools in my toolbox. That's really my goal for you today, is to walk away with actionable strategies. And the can't do, won't do framework brings you right to those in a really efficient and effective way. So our agenda for today, I have an ambitious evening. I'm just going to warn you. If you're like, oh my gosh, she talks fast, buckle up. We got a lot to share. So first, we're going to get to the root of the issue. We're going to introduce the can't do versus won't do framework. And then we're going to go in depth on strategies if it's a can't do situation or if it's a won't do situation. So you get the recording, you get the slides. So don't feel overwhelmed if I am talking too fast. I value your time. I got to fit all of it in especially when our kids have so many different needs. I want to give you as many different tools as possible for your toolbox to approach these challenging situations. So first up, can't do versus won't do. We want to get to the root of the issue, the root of this challenging behavior. Is your child not meeting expectations because he can't or because he won't? A can't do situation means that the work or the demand is too hard. The child does not have those skills yet. We need to either teach the new skills that are missing, we need to add in supports to help them be successful, or we need to adjust our expectations. A won't do situation means the child has the skills, they're just not motivated, right? We need to add or adjust the reinforcer. Look at that. So every decision we make, you and I, our kids, everyone, is shaped by two things. It's shaped by the skills or ability to perform that action and our motivation to act or not act. Every time we engage in a behavior, it means that we have both the skills and the motivation, right? Really quick before I got on this call, I made dinner. I had the motivation. I was hungry and I had to be online at 6:45 and I had the motivation, right? I had the skills. I knew how to do it. I had the motivation. I was hungry. I knew how to make a quesadilla, right? Both of those things impacted my ability to cook that meal. Now, if I wasn't hungry, I might not have done it. If I didn't know how to make a quesadilla, then I couldn't have done it. We need both pieces. So let me give you another silly example from my life. So I am not a runner, you guys. I don't like running. If you see me running, you should probably run too because something's chasing me. Those of you that run marathons, those of you that were up at 5 a.m. today to get your 5 miles in, I love that for you. It's just not me, right? So someone asks me to run a mile. I'm going to be like, oh, thank you so much for asking. No, I don't want to. I'm just going to watch TV. No, thanks, right? I don't want to. I can do it. I just don't want to. I don't have the motivation. Now, if someone's like, hey, Sasha, if you run a mile, I'll give you $500. You guys, I'm out there. I'm doing it. I might not like it, but oh my gosh, I got the skills and I've got the motivation. $500. Heck yeah, I'll run, right? I'm going to engage in that behavior now because I have the skills and I have the motivation. Now, let's say that someone asks me to run a mile in 7 minutes. I don't have those skills. I know I don't have those skills so much in my core that I probably am not going to even bother trying. Even if someone was like, well, I'll give you $500, I'll give you $5,000. It doesn't matter how much reinforcement or motivation you offered me. I don't have those skills. And again, I'm probably not going to even bother trying, right? I don't have the skills to run a 7-minute mile. It's not going to happen. So for our kids, we want to think about this combination of skills and motivation. Some of our kids are facing expectations in their classroom that are equivalent to asking me to run the 7-minute mile. They don't have those skills yet. They don't have the attention span. They don't have the flexibility. They don't have the organization. They just don't. They'll get there, but they don't have it right now. Throwing reinforcement at the issue is not going to help. Throwing punishment or aversive punitive consequences at the issue is most definitely not going to help. I mean, let's stick with this silly running example. If you're like, well, if you can't run a mile in 7 minutes, I'm going to take away $500. That still isn't going to teach me that skill. Punishment does not lead to new skills. Punishment is not an instructional strategy. So it's not going to affect whether or not I have those skills. So we want to start to think about our students' behavior and even our own behavior. I really like thinking about things in terms of our own behavior in a can't do or won't do framework. In the chat right now, let's see if you can share a won't do situation for you. Even think about the last 24 hours. Think about a choice that you made where you had the skills, you just didn't have the motivation. And I'll give you a few examples. Who in the last 24 hours ordered food, ordered a pizza, ordered DoorDash? You probably had the skills to cook dinner, but you didn't have the motivation, right? Who pressed snooze on their alarm clock this morning? Who had plans to go to the gym, but didn't go, right? Yes, stop eating the candy. Oh my God, yes, please stop eating the candy. You have the skills to stop eating the candy. You don't have the motivation, right? Not going to happen. Who does this? Household chores are in here a lot. Like who had big plans of like, I'm going to get home from work today and I'm going to do all the laundry. I'm going to mop the floor. And then it just doesn't happen, right? Yeah. Plans to walk the dog, wasn't motivated. Who does this with their laundry? We were talking about this at the earlier session. I don't mind doing the laundry. What I hate about the laundry is putting it away. You know, you like take it out of the dryer and then you slowly during the week work off that pile until that pile's smaller and maybe you put it back in the wash if there's just a few things left, right? We don't have the motivation. I can fold the laundry and put it away. I just don't want to. Now let's think of the reverse. Let's think of can't do situations. And this one's a little bit trickier at first. Think about times where maybe you wanted to get something done. You just didn't know how. You didn't have the skills. Tech things fall in here a lot. Major like household repair things fall in this category a lot. In our main floor bathroom, only the hot water works for some reason, right? This is like very problematic for me. Like people come in our house, think they broke our sink. It's hard to wash your hands, right? I would love to know how to fix this. I could probably spend a long time on YouTube and figure it out, but I don't know how. I want to. I don't know how. I'm going to have to call a plumber, right? Yeah. Help with my son's math. I'd love to be able to help you. I don't know how to do it, right? Exactly. So start to think about your own behaviors as well as your child's own behaviors from this can't do or won't do framework. So how do we identify and how do we figure out if it's a can't do or won't do? The first piece is focused observation. And the idea of observation feels kind of light and like, oh yeah, whatever. But the combination of observation and really this last piece, analyzing the current skill set, can be really, really powerful. And when I say observation, it really does mean just watch. And I know that seems like really silly with your own child, but really look at what their struggles are. What things are they being successful with? And when you observe, you have to observe two things. You have to observe the struggles or wins that your child's having, but you also have to observe what the expectation is that they're supposed to be doing, right? If you are like, hey, when you get home from school, here's the 16 things that you have to do and buy, and you need to observe that, hey, you gave a 16 bullet point list that with no visual, just verbal. You need to observe that the phone was out the whole time, so there was a big distraction. You need to observe that siblings are home. Those are distractions. We want to observe everything in that environment. We want to compare what is the expectation they're supposed to be doing with what is their skill set to see if there's that disconnect. And taking some data and seeing like, hey, really, how long are things taking? Setting a quick timer on your phone. Things like that can be really powerful. Offering that big ticket reinforcer, like me with the running with the $500. If you offer that big ticket reinforcer, does that impact behavior, right? Because in that example with me, you knew right away that like, oh no, it wasn't the skills for the running, it's the motivation for me, right? I can run, I just don't want to. So those can be some interesting ways to start to identify what if it is a can't do or a won't do, but really honing in on what are those child's current skills and how well do they match or not match with those expectations. So if you get yourself to a can't do, you're like, okay, based on what I know my child can do, actually, there are a lot of can't do's. For can't do's, there's 3 main ways you can approach the situation. 1, you can build skills. 2, you can add in supports. And 3, you can adjust the task or expectation. So let's look at my running example and see how we would do it with these 3 things. So first off, build skills, right? I can't run a 7-minute mile. For building skills, you would put me in an intensive running program. I would have a running coach. I'd have a nutritionist. I'd have a plan that I have to follow, someone that texts me and wakes me up, right? That's a hard thing, right? That's going to take time too. I'm not like learning how to do a 7-minute mile overnight. Number 2, add in supports. So we know I can't do this right now. What supports can you give me to help me be more successful? Maybe you'd be like, hey, Sasha, you can use rollerblades for your 7-minute mile. Hey, you can use an electric scooter, right? You could take unlimited breaks. What supports can help scaffold and get me there? Last, adjust the task or expectation. Really think about like, hey, 7-minute mile is like really far from where she's at. Maybe we need to go with a 9-minute mile, or maybe we want to do a certain amount, a shorter time period, a shorter pace, or shorter length at a certain pace, right? Those could be some ways that you adjust the task or expectation. If it's a won't do scenario, the main thing here we're looking at is reinforcement. We either need to add in reinforcement or adjust the reinforcer. And if you're like, oh, there is a reinforcer, it's just not working, guess what? Then it's not a reinforcer. It's funny how reinforcement works that way. So we're going to dive into both of these areas. First up, can't do. So as we said, the 3 main ways for can't do: build skills, add in supports, adjust expectation. First, build skills. This is the long-term plan. And you can do multiple of these plans at the same time. That's the beauty of it, right? Tools in a toolbox. But this is the long-term plan that we want to really look forward. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in our second session this evening. But look forward to like, what are those big picture skills that we need and how can we work on them? Most of these missing skills that we see our kids being really impacted by on a day-to-day basis with negative behaviors are going to include executive functioning skills. And that's what we'll get into at 8 p.m. There's going to be some underlying threat of executive functions. And I feel like confident making that overgeneralization because executive function skills just work their way into almost everything we do because they're how we achieve goal-related behavior. So we need focused, direct instruction on how to complete that expectation and really how to build these executive functioning skills. So if you're new to the world of executive functioning skills, welcome. I feel like it's a light bulb moment when you learn all about these. I started really heavily researching executive functioning skills probably about 10 years ago. And as a BCBA, it was such a light bulb moment, just like I said, because I realized these really were a missing piece in my behavior plans. When it came to replacement behaviors, when it came to function-based contingencies, this is what I needed. This is what I was missing. Executive functioning skills are cognitive processes required for goal-directed behavior. I like this definition. The skills to perform or execute a task. Executive functioning skills execute a task. These involve everything you do every day to manage your own behavior. These skills work together, so a weakness in one area can affect the overall ability to perform a task. And we'll talk in a little bit later about how to prioritize what skills we're working on, but these really impact each other quite quickly. Here are the 11 executive functioning skills. In the Google Drive link that I shared earlier, there's a nice like quick and dirty handout that has the little definitions of each one. These, I would say, roughly go in order from less complex to more complex. That's not to say that if you have a child this age, they should have all these skills mastered. That's not it. And by no means are this first half easier either. It's just that in that second half of the list, things like organization, time management, flexibility for sure start to include a lot of the previous skills. In order to have strong time management skills, you have to have task initiation and working memory and sustained attention. So they really start to build. So here are 11 skills: response inhibition, working memory, emotional control, sustained attention, task initiation, planning, organization, time management, persistence, flexibility, and metacognition. So we'll talk a little bit more about these throughout this first hour, but definitely get more in depth in that second part of the workshop tonight. So how can we build these skills for our children? We really need direct instruction here, purposeful, planned, individualized instruction on how to meet expectations and build those executive functions. The good news here is that we should provide this focused, direct instruction embedded into our day within the same setting or a similar setting as possible where that skill will be used. And I always say this is good news because No parent or teacher has all this extra time to be like setting aside 20 minutes to work on executive functions. And that's really not what you should do. Research has really shown that to generalize these skills, which means to use them in different times and different settings, we want instruction really embedded into the day. If your student is struggling in the morning with getting ready to get out of the house and get on the bus, that's when instruction should be provided. If your child is struggling getting homework done, that's when the instruction should be provided. So we want this really embedded into our day and into that real world setting. You want to, 1, set up a visual tool. 2, teach that tool, because tools need to be taught. 3, fade that support. And 4th, monitor. So the really main components here are this visual tool and prompt fading. And that's what that fading adult support is. We need both of these together. And we're going to talk pretty in depth on why the visual tool is really important. And it goes back to that prompt fading piece. So these are the 2 kind of key strategies, the visual tool and the prompt fading. And the prompt fading is very important because we want our kids to be independent. None of you are committing to following your child around for the rest of their life and reminding them what time they have to get up in the morning, or reminding them when they have to go to work or when something has to be turned in. Absolutely not. We want our kids to be independent. In order to do that, we have to pull back. We have to fade our prompts. We have to get them to be successful. And a visual tool can be a really good stepping stone to get there. Now, visuals are things that are embedded in our environment, and a visual prompt allows for the highest level of independence. It allows us to remove ourselves because our kids can use a visual prompt without us. They don't need us there. So has anyone ever seen these hand dryers, the Dyson hand dryers, the ones you go like that? They're like in McDonald's, they're in airports, gas stations, right? Now, these are newer relatively in like the hand drying industry. The first time you came around one of these, I don't know when it was, maybe 10 years ago, was there a Dyson rep standing right there next to the hand dryer to give you a tutorial and show you how to use this hand dryer? No, probably not. You probably use the visuals on top of the hand dryer. There's a little picture that shows you to do this, right? And you did that all by yourself. You didn't need that Dyson rep by you, right? Look at that independence. That's what we want for our kids. We want to create a tool and then they use it all by themselves without us. So let's talk for a minute about what prompts are and this help that we're giving, because sometimes prompts get a bad rep, but they're something really important and powerful. Prompts are any support or help that we give our kids to help them meet an expectation or complete a behavior. Prompt fading is essential in our plan because we have to remove our help. We have to always be thinking about how we're removing ourselves, because that's how we get independence. Some examples of what prompts could be. A prompt could be telling your child, hey, don't forget to put your homework in your backpack. A prompt could be putting a sticky note on the fridge that says lunch. So you see that on the fridge in the morning and you get your lunch out of the fridge. A prompt could be handing your child a stack of plates after you've asked him to set the table. You hand him the stack of plates. You're like, okay, go ahead. A prompt could be the blinking seatbelt light on your dashboard, or like the buzzing little noise that comes on if you don't put your seatbelt on, right? You don't put your seatbelt on, it starts beeping, and that beeps faster and louder, right? That's a prompt. It's reminding you to put your seatbelt on. Meet that expectation. A prompt could be pointing someone in the direction of where you told them to go. Someone's like, hey, where's the assembly today? You're like, it's in the South Gym over there. You're giving that extra reinforcement, extra support, helping that person achieve that behavior of finding the assembly. We all use prompts all day, every day. The big picture goal here is that when we are giving a prompt, we have a plan for how we're going to remove it later. So our kids don't need prompts forever and ever, right? Prompts are a good thing because they help our kids be successful. They help them learn and scaffold to new skills. They help them meet that expectation. But once we get them there, then we have to pull ourselves back because the goal is independence. The goal is that they don't need us anymore. Now, over prompting can be dangerous because we want our kids to not rely on us to meet expectations in the settings they are at, right? And the reason that over prompting is dangerous is because we often over prompt unintentionally. And I want you to take this little moment now to have a little reflective reprieve and just think about where are times in your day where you are over prompting. And we're all guilty of this because we're all busy, right? No one over prompts on purpose. No one wakes up on a Monday morning and is like, you know what? I'm going to get a really big cup of coffee and over prompt today. No, right? We over prompt because we're trying to get a lot of things done. right? We're just trying to get your kid out the door and on the bus. You're trying to get, this finished. You're trying to get dinner on the table. We're just trying to do things so we don't even realize we're doing it. And research has shown that prompts are best removed when prompt fading is planned for, not hoped for, because that's what happens. We just get stuck in our routines. We think prompts will be removed, that our help and support will be naturally removed, and it doesn't. We have to plan for that, right? We have to plan for that. So the reason, and really good question. I'm going to talk about writing notes and visual prompts. So the reason that the prompt fading and the visual tool are so important is because a visual prompt is at the highest level of prompt hierarchy. So when we think about prompts, we're going to think about them from kind of most invasive, meaning like the adult is heavily involved and there's less independence, all the way up to most independent and less invasive, right? So at the bottom of the prompt hierarchy is modeling, right? You're going to fully show someone how to do. You're like, hey, can you cut carrots for dinner? Come watch me. I'm going to show you exactly how to dice this, right? Then we go to direct verbal. Direct verbal is directly telling someone what to do. Please get your soccer cleats out, put your clothes from soccer practice upstairs in the washer, and put your bag in the closet, right? Very specific. An indirect verbal prompt would be like, hey, where should your bag go after soccer? You're giving a clue, right? Gestures is pointing, being like, hey, dude, bag. And then a visual would be a checklist, a note, a positional cue even, right? So these are some examples I just already talked through this slide, but modeling, showing what to do, direct verbal, telling what to do, indirect, that hint, gesture, pointing to an area, item, or clue. Now, visuals could be written out directions, checklists, pictures, positional cue, timers, devices. All of these things are visual prompts. So in this question in the chat, does writing notes as prompts for ourselves count as visuals? How would we stop writing notes to ourselves to become independent? So that's a really good point. And I think when I think about this, I think about using like the maps on your phone to get directions, right? Great visual prompt. You're like, I don't know how to get to Starbucks. I'm in a new town. I'm going to put Starbucks in my phone and it's going to tell me how to get there, right? That's a visual prompt. It's going to show me the pictures. Now, eventually, hopefully, we wouldn't need that anymore, right? If you're going to Starbucks every day, after like 5 days, you hopefully wouldn't need these maps. Like you wouldn't need that prompt. Now, things like putting a sticky note on your fridge to say lunch doesn't mean you're not independent. It just means that that's a strategy and a prompt that you need because you're busy, you're tired, you're rushing out the door, right? I wouldn't consider writing yourself a sticky note, meaning you're not independent, especially because you're setting up that prompt for yourself, right? The reason that we lean on visual prompts is because our kids can use it without us. And they can also create those prompts for themselves in the future. And when it comes to later, which we'll talk about executive functioning skills, this all ties so nicely together, is these are really how we all compensate for struggles with executive functionings that we all have, right? If you're not someone who's like naturally super organized, you may benefit from like color coding some things or having certain bins in your house where like I can put all my mail in here and then I deal with it later. That's a good coping strategy because you know that maybe organization doesn't come as easily. So how do we fade prompts? How do we remove ourselves? 2 big ways we can do this. One, we can try less intrusive prompts over time. We can go up this prompt hierarchy. We can start using indirect verbal. We can start using gestural. Second, you can also wait and see. Technical ABA language, time delay, but it's really just waiting. And this one is so simple, but so powerful. So many of our kids are really struggling with processing speed, and we are giving them so much information so quickly. And if they don't comply immediately, we jump in and help. And so a lot of our kids are just waiting for that help. I mean, why wouldn't they, right? Eventually, someone will tell me what to do. Eventually, someone will tell me where it should go. So I'm just going to chill. I'm just going to wait. Instead, if we can pull back, if we can wait and really be purposeful about this, I mean, count to like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, use the Mississippis in your head, then we can see if they can engage in those behaviors on their own without us having to step in. Again, remember, we over prompt unintentionally, so be purposeful about your prompting. Talk about this with your significant other, with your family, with your child, right? And even sound silly, take data on it. Grab a Post-it and just tally how many prompts you give while getting ready to get out the door, while getting ready for dinner, just to see like, hey, you might think, oh my gosh, my child's so independent in the morning. And you look at your Post-it and you're like, oh crap, there's like 32 tallies on here, right? I guess I'm giving a lot more prompts and reminders than I should be. It's good to know that because now you have a new goal for yourself. All right, so that was the first piece, teaching those missing skills. That was a big picture view there. But remember, the core of the teaching the missing skill is the visual prompt, because they can use it on their own, and fading or help. So giving a tool, pulling back from the tool so they can use it independently. The next piece for can't do is adding in supports. What supports can we add into the environment to help that child scaffold to that expectation more readily? So think about what type of supports can we add to the environment to help your child meet those expectations. The three big areas we're going to talk about here are consistency in routines, clear verbal cues, and visuals. And some of these kind of seem like, oh, of course I do this, but these are like small and mighty, but powerful. And these are going to tie really nicely into what we just talked about. You're going to see there's like little threads and themes that go through all of these areas on purpose, because these all can really affect so many different areas. So first up, consistency and routine. It is all about the ability to sequence and anticipate what is coming next. We thrive on consistent routines. Predictable sequences lead to less negative behaviors, less anxiety, more independence, more efficiency. Before we got on the call, we were all talking about like, you know, right when COVID started and virtual instruction. And man, I mean, though the hardest part for everyone, all of us, was we lost all of our routines, right? All of those things we can fall back and rely on. So I'm going to share my silly alien example about consistent routines. I always share this silly analogy. Let's say that we are all abducted by aliens. Okay, stay with me. I haven't totally lost it. And I'm going to give you two choices of scenarios, and you can pick which scenario you'd prefer during your alien abduction. Okay, see which one you'd prefer. Now, remember, when you're abducted by aliens, you are stressed, you are anxious, you are scared, right? We're not in like a good state. We're feeling pretty freaked out. So we're abducted by aliens, and the first option is blue and red tables, okay? Every day, the aliens take us to the same places. First, they take us to the room in blue table room, and every day in blue table room, it's the same thing. In blue table room, life's awesome. We get to watch Netflix, we get to eat ice cream, we get to drink wine. It's all good, right? Then we go to red table room, and every day in red table room, it's the same. It's not as great as blue table room. The only snacks there are celery, with no ranch, which that's the whole reason to eat celery is for the ranch. The only activities are pages of long division, which that's no fun. And the only music you can listen to is Kid Rock. I mean, sorry if you're a big Kid Rock fan, but that's going to get old real quick, right? So that's scenario number one. Scenario number two is green and yellow tables. In this scenario, the aliens take us to green table room, and we never know what it's going to be. Some days it's Netflix, some days it's Kid Rock. Then they take us to yellow table room, and we never know what the snack's going to be. It could be celery. It could be ice cream. We don't know. Now, you guys in the chat for me, in this highly stressful situation of being abducted by aliens, which scenario do you prefer? Number one, same every day, or number two, unpredictable? Yeah, you guys, I am team number one all day, right? I'm sorry, I don't ever want to be surprised by Kid Rock. I have to be mentally prepared. I mean, can you even imagine the anguish of expecting a big bowl of ice cream and someone handing you celery? I mean, you guys, come on. Even though those of you that aren't participating in the chat, that are like, well, maybe I'd like some changes, unpredictability. We feel okay with changes and unpredictability when we feel safe and secure, when we feel grounded, right? When we feel stable. In the scenario of being abducted by aliens, we don't feel that. For a lot of our kids, the situations they're in right now, they don't feel safe and secure. They don't feel stable. Maybe at school, maybe with friends, maybe with new changes that are happening, right? So that those changes aren't comfortable because they already aren't feeling comfortable. So we want that predictability. It's really everything. So consistency and predictability, that alien example, it's silly, but it's going to stick in your head. Consistent routines. Second, clear verbal cues. Be consistent when giving verbal directions. Give verbal directions concretely and directly. Avoid giving directions in the form of a question. If you're like, hey, Johnny, did you want to come get started on your math homework? What's he going to tell you? No, I don't. Hey, Johnny, do you want to go clean your room? No, I don't. Right? I mean, you set yourself up, right? what happens in those scenarios, and maybe it's like a Midwestern nice thing that we like do that. We're like, hey, do you want to whatever? Is we oftentimes then override the no. Like Johnny's like, no, I don't want to clean my room. And you're like, well, too bad. You have to go do it. Or like, too bad. It's time for dinner. Sit down. Or too bad. It's time for homework. Sit down. In doing that, we are unintentionally teaching our child that their no doesn't matter, that their no isn't valued. And that is, I know, not a message we want to send. We want our kids to know that their no is powerful and should be respected, and they should be able to set boundaries and say when they feel uncomfortable, right? We want to avoid giving directions when there's competing distractions. This one's huge. If your child's watching TV, playing video games, on their phone, etc., they are not listening to you. They're not. Doesn't matter how many directions you give them. You have to get their attention first. Get the attention first, then give directions. Be specific, and repetition to a point is key with those specific, consistent directions. When we get to giving the direction, right, we have their attention, we know we're not going to use a question, we then have to say what we mean. The key here is telling your child what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. When you tell a child, an individual, what not to do, you are assuming that they have the skills to infer what they should do instead. And not everyone does. Inferences are hard, right? There's a lot of like innuendos and different areas of gray that our kids just don't understand yet. I mean, something as simple as saying like, hey, don't run in the hall means that our kids have to infer like, hey, I should walk, right? If you're like, hey, don't spend all night on Snapchat, they're like, cool, I'm going to go on TikTok, right? We have to be concrete about what we want them to do. Very specific, right? After 30 minutes, I want you to turn your phone off and I want you to read. Getting very specific here. And I've talked quite a bit already about visuals, like a visual tool and using visuals. So we have in our kind of list right now, we have our consistent routines, clear verbal cues, and last visuals. And if you've kind of been thinking like, okay, visuals are pictures, why do we need that? That's not necessarily what I mean. Visuals could be pictures, but visuals also could be a Post-it with words. Words are a visual prompt. I have slides tonight because I'm a strong visual learner, as I imagine many of you are. And it would be pretty boring to just listen to me talk for 90 minutes if I didn't have slides. Visuals reinforce what you're hearing. I'm not great with audiobooks. Like I listen to an audiobook, 3 chapters in, I'm like planning what I'm making for dinner. I'm like planning my to-do list, right? I get distracted. I need the words in front of me. So visuals could be a written checklist. It could be a picture choice board. It could be rules with pictures. It could just be written dry erase board, changeable things. It could be something written really easy on a piece of paper. Could be simple, could be pre-made, anything in between. We all use visual prompts, right? Think about the last time we were at a hotel and there's that little crappy coffee maker. That little crappy coffee maker had a visual schedule. Maybe you have a spot where you keep your keys. You have a certain hook or basket or bowl. That's a visual prompt. That's where you always put your keys. Google Calendar, any digital calendars, all of these are visual prompts. Who does Home Chef or HelloFresh? We did one tonight in my house. I was telling you guys, made that quesadilla really quick. All visuals, right? Written out directions, pictures of everything. That's why a lot of those meal services are successful and popular, because when you sit down to eat your meal, it really looks and tastes like what they intended it to, right? Visual prompts include words, pictures, proximity of or location of an item. They really help our child understand their world. Add visuals to help your child meet that expectations. Checklist, positional cues, little reminders that can be embedded into the environment. Schedules are really good for this. Digital schedules, written on a Post-it or dry erase board, planners, all of this can be huge. Checklists, oh my gosh, I live and breathe by my to-do list. Checklists, routines, things like that are great. Choice menus. We're going to talk a little bit about choices in the second half of our workshop today. Choices are everything, can be words, can be pictures. Reminders that are taped into a planner, that are on the mirror, that are on the desk or the closet, that are right there where you can see it. Rules, really listing out what are appropriate choices and what aren't. It's going to be that visual to reinforce those discussions. All right, our last piece of can't do. I got to hustle up so I got enough time for our won't do. Adjust the task or expectation. So remember, we could teach the new skill, we could add in supports, and last, you could adjust the task or expectation. So want to really get to the core of like, Why is this expectation so difficult, right? What makes this task or demand so difficult? And how can I make it less difficult for my child? So look at the way the task is presented and consider that core skill. Does this skill require a lot of patience or waiting? Does this skill require a lot of organization or planning? Consider the changes you could make to help scaffold that skill. If it requires a lot of planning and your child struggles with planning, maybe you can do the planning for them and break it down. If the skill is really just a work endurance attention span thing, can you break it into shorter time periods? So some big picture ways to adjust the task. Make it shorter. This will really accommodate students that are struggling with task initiation, attention span, work endurance. Build in those breaks. Same thing. This will accommodate that attention span issue. Give clear steps. For kids that struggle or get overwhelmed with planning, this can be really helpful. I just don't know where to get started, right? Give choice. Choice is so, so powerful. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but I mean, there are kids, I think, feel very often like there is very little control in their life. They have very little control. The more choices we give, the more control they have, right? And the more that they can safely make choices and have control in a way that's appropriate for their age and environment and all that. So giving control, kind of continue on that. Give lots of choices, materials, order of activities, locations, activities. This is really helpful for students that struggle with response inhibition. This is basically impulse control and emotional control. So if kids struggle with those, control can be really helpful. And so last ways we said giving choices, clear steps. The last two pieces are highlighting that reinforcer and making that task more appealing. We can make a task more appealing by letting them listen to music, letting them sit by a friend, talk to a friend. If your kids are competitive, making things a challenge and beating their own scores and times can be really powerful. And last piece here is really avoiding overload. There are some times where a child may just be too overwhelmed to learn a new skill, right? They're too tired. They had a stressful weekend. There are other things going on in their life, and you don't want to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. So consistency and predictability help this, but be aware of those triggers and don't try to overload when that's happening. All right, so we covered can't do versus won't do framework. We covered what to do for can't do's. We're going to build skills, add support, and adjust the task. Now let's get to reinforcement and won't do's. In the chat, really good question. Do you think people are way more visual due to computers too? No longer do we listen to radio and listen to a radio play and visuals on our own, and creativity has shrunk. You know, there definitely has been a lot of research on computers and social media and how that has impacted not only our attention spans, but the way we learn. But it's always interesting to me to think about how we naturally maybe learn better and then what role those other things have played, right? Things like social media and technology. Temple Grandin in her work talks quite a bit about learning styles and how her brain works in pictures and how she visually makes sense of the world and organizes her thoughts. So it's interesting to think about if our kids or ourselves naturally were one type of learner, more of an auditory learner, what role does all this content we take in all the time play on that? So yeah, it's kind of interesting. All right, so won't do. So we covered can't do, now won't do. Won't do means the skills are there, but the reinforcement is not. Reinforcement is our why for engaging in any behavior. We need to add in reinforcement or adjust reinforcement. The basic concept is that if a behavior is followed by something awesome, you'll want to do it more, right? Let's say you go out this weekend with a bunch of friends, you're at dinner, and you make a comment or a joke and everyone laughs. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so funny. The next weekend you're with a different group of friends. So you make a similar comment, right? The same joke and everyone laughs again. And you're like, oh, still funny. A month later, you're with some family members, you make the same joke again and people laugh. You keep repeating that joke or that type of comment because you know it's going to nail it. You're going to kill it. You're like, everyone's going to laugh. This is funny. And maybe in like 3 months, your significant other's like, stop saying that. It's not funny anymore because they've had to hear it every single time, right? If something's followed by something awesome, you want to keep doing it. Reinforcement is that something awesome. Reinforcement is something that comes after a behavior that will increase the chance of that behavior happening again. Keyword is after. And reinforcement, as you kind of can see on this definition, is all about the future. Reinforcement is about being proactive. Reinforcement is about increasing positive behaviors next week, next month, next year, That's what reinforcement is all about. So the example is very timely, and I give this example year round, not just on November 1st, the day after Halloween. My favorite example of reinforcement is with trick-or-treating. So now you may remember from when your own kids were little that there's a specific Halloween for every child when trick-or-treating really clicks, when they get it, right? Usually around 3, 2, 4, somewhere in there, between 2 and 4. There's a Halloween where they're like, oh my God, I get it. This trick-or-treating thing is awesome. So maybe like 10 years ago, I go over to my friend's house. She's got 2 kids, twins, and we're going to take them trick-or-treating. We're all excited. And I get to her house and they don't want to go. They're not into it. They don't get it. We keep trying to explain it. We're practicing in the house. They don't want to go. And you know what? I respect that. Trick-or-treating is super weird. We tell our kids all year, don't go to strangers' house. Don't talk to people you don't know. Don't go to someone's house you don't know. And then on Halloween, we're like, yes, go to that house of someone you don't know who's dressed like a murderer and take their candy. Like, right? So confusing. My friends' kids kept being like, can't we just eat this candy that mom bought? And we're like, no, that's for other kids. And they're like, what? We're like, come on, you're going to like it. So we drag them to the first house. They go up the steps. They knock on the door. They hold out their bag, trick or treat, candy. And they both whip and look at us. And we're like, yeah, you can keep it. And they're like, oh, weird. Next house, up to the door, knock, trick or treat, candy. And they're like, yeah, you can keep that one too. And they're like, oh. Third house, a little bit faster, knock on the door, trick or treat, candy. They kind of side eye. We're like, you can keep that one too. By the 4th house, they are sprinting and we are trick or treating for 2 hours. Because that behavior of knocking on the door, saying trick or treat was immediately followed by something awesome. They got candy, right? So they wanted to do it again and again and again and again. It's easy to see and cool to see those behaviors snowball and really become more frequent over time right in front of your eyes. So it seems all simple and beautiful, right? Just give reinforcers all the time, give candy all the time. It's all great, but not so simple. The biggest missteps with reinforcement is what reinforcer is given and when the reinforcer is given. And if you mess up these two seemingly simple things, it's no longer reinforcement. People tell me like, oh, reinforcement doesn't work for him. And I'm like, you mean that thing doesn't work as a reinforcer for him? Because if it's not working, it by definition is not a reinforcer, right? Reinforcement takes many forms. Reinforcement could be friends laughing. It could be Netflix. It could be being alone. It could be coffee. It could be peer approval. It could be getting sent to the hallway. It could be good grades. It could be stickers. It could be none of these things. Reinforcement is individual to each and every person. There's also, what is a reinforcer to you is not necessarily a reinforcer to me. Not every kid likes the iPad. Not every kid likes Cheetos or the pretty gross combo of Cheetos and iPad, or that orange dust is stuck in the button forever and ever. You know it. There's also an important distinction between preferred items and reinforcers. There are things we like versus things that we will work for. Now, here are my preferred items, things that I like. I like fall scented candles all year. I don't discriminate. I want my house to smell like the inside of a pumpkin all the time. Drives everyone that lives here nuts. I don't care. I like it. I like really trashy reality TV, like trashy, like Housewives, Love is Blind, Vanderpump Rules. Yeah, I just like to relax by watching like rich, fillered faces fight with each other. I don't know why. It's just chill. It's just relaxing for me. And then I really like Starbucks. I have 2 coffee makers in my house, but I still like to go to Starbucks too. Now I like those things, but I'm not always willing to work for those things. If an administrator from a school district called me and said, hey, Sasha, will you get on a plane, fly 5 hours, do an 8-hour presentation, and then fly home? And in exchange, we'll let you watch Real Housewives. I'm going to be like, no, thank you. I'll take the paycheck, please, right? That's not going to match the response effort of that behavior. That's a hard thing, doing a full day presentation, flying, all that, for just Real Housewives, right? For some of our kids, the reinforcers that they're accepting or, reinforcers, it's kind of like a fall scented candle, like praise, good grades, peer approval. It's a fall scented candle. They'll take it. It feels good, but they're not going to do something new and hard for it, right? They don't really care. So we want to figure out what a reinforcer is. And this can be tricky. Some of our kids, maybe with special needs, may not have the verbal skills to tell us or the choice-making skills to identify. Students may just struggle to identify their own reinforcers. And really it becomes a challenge because reinforcers change. Let's say that, at lunchtime, or maybe you haven't eaten dinner yet and you're really hungry right now. And I came up to you and was like, hey, do you want a plate of cheese fries? Like right before lunch, 11:59. You'd be like, yes, I would love a plate of cheese fries. Thank you so much. Like, who doesn't love cheese fries? But let's say I came up to you after you just finished a meal at a big restaurant and I said, hey, do you want a plate of cheese fries? You'd probably be like, oh God, no. Cheesecake I'll take, right? We get sick of things. We want things at different times. I've been using this example and it's like really just gotten so much better lately, but we also get sick of things. I call this the Taylor Swift effect. I've been using this example for like 5 years and it's just like perfect right now. A new Taylor Swift song comes out, we love it, right? We listen to it in the car, at work, at home. And after like a month, you're like, if I hear Karma again, I'm going to lose my mind. Same thing now, right? We all love Taylor. Who's she dating? What football game is she at? Oh my God, it's great. It's great. Let me watch it all. And then after a while, you're like, oh my God, I don't care about, Travis anymore. My gosh. I mean, some of you maybe aren't there yet. Some of you Swifties, you're still caring. But eventually we get sick of things. Same with our kids. They get sick of things, right? So how do we identify reinforcers? Observe. Again, watch. What do they gravitate towards? What do they go to when there's free time? What are your kids doing? Talk to teachers. What's happening at school? What works, what doesn't? And then trial and error, trying things, seeing what happens, seeing what is effective and what actually causes an increase in behaviors and what doesn't. Now, don't be afraid of contrived reinforcers. In a school setting, naturally occurring reinforcers are going to be good grades, peer approval, teacher approval, work completion. For some of our kids, these are not reinforcers right now. We may have to add things to the environment, right? Technology time, allowances, things like that. Those are things we're adding to the environment. Start there. Start with what works. It is not our job to decide what's a reinforcer and what's not for our students. So start with short breaks, start to add in and match with those other reinforcers and fade to that. Our goal is to fade to naturally occurring reinforcers, things like praise, work completion, grades. We can pair our tangible contrived reinforcers with those naturally occurring ones. Now, the second misstep that we said is the problem with reinforcement is when we give the reinforcer. Immediate is best. When we are in the process of building up new behaviors, it's a common mistake to wait too long, right? The connection needs to be really apparent. We want to catch them being good. And now before you're like, oh my gosh, Sasha, who can give reinforcement immediately? Like that's not sustainable. It's not. That's where you start. That's not where you live. We want to start with that consistent, immediate reinforcement to build up those behaviors. Then we can fade to that natural schedule of reinforcement, which is delayed reinforcement. We all function on delayed reinforcement, and that's where we want to get our kids to be. The reason delayed reinforcement works is because of our history of learning. We know, based on our history, based on our life, our experiences, that reinforcement eventually comes with certain areas, right? Think about our jobs. None of you have jobs where you walk out of work and someone hands you a stack of cash for a hard day's work, right? I mean, that would be pretty unusual. Instead, you have, 2 paychecks a month. You get paid on the 1st and the 15th or every other Friday. It's delayed reinforcement, right? But you get up, you go to work, you do your job because you know that paycheck is coming based on your experience. Now think for a second. Would you go to work if you didn't get paid? What if you missed one paycheck? I bet you'd still come to work, right? We have other reinforcers and our history of learning is actually so strong that we're probably going to think, oh, that was a mistake. It's coming. There's a tech issue. Payroll's having some problems. It's coming. Now in the chat for me, what if you missed 5 paychecks? Are you going to go to work? What do you think? No, right? Our history of learning has changed. So our behavior is probably going to change, right? It used to be, I go to work, I do my job, I get paid. Now it's, I go to work, I do my job, I don't get paid. So in turn, our behaviors will change. Also, I'm going to go like 3 minutes over on my first. I'm giving myself a lot of leeway with these 2 sessions, the 60-minute and the 30-minute. Normally, I'm very strict on time, but I'm going to go about 3 minutes over 8 o'clock if you're just staying for the first hour, but we're almost done with reinforcement. Has anyone seen an ad like this online? What do you think in the chat for me when you see this ad? Up to $54 per month, only 23 people are needed. Get started by clicking here. When you see an ad like this, what are you thinking? Right, Christine? Yeah, right. BS. Exactly. Too good to be true. Scam. Sketchy. I feel like this would give my computer a virus if I clicked on it. Honestly, that's what I think. What about this sign? What do you think when you see this sign? Are you likely to call this number to sell your house? No way. When you see this sign in the sketchy ad, you think scam, too good to be true. No way, right? You don't have a history of learning with those things. You have a history of learning with receiving a paycheck from a school or a workplace. If you got hired by a school to be a teacher and they said, hey, we want you to work for 2 weeks and then your paycheck will come, there's no alarms going off in your head. You're like, cool, that seems legit, right? I have a history of learning with reliable workplaces. But if we saw the ad or the number, we're like, no, sketchy, that's a scam, because we don't have a history of learning with a sketchy ad or a sketchy sign. When we jump to delayed reinforcement too quickly for our kids, we're like this ad. We're like the sketchy sign. They're calling us. That's BS. I got to do all this work, then something awesome's coming. No way. Do all this work, and then on Friday, this will happen. Do all of this response effort, and then this great thing will happen. They don't believe us because we're jumping too quickly to too delayed of reinforcement. Instead, start small. Realize that your kids may not yet have that history of learning, that experience, right? And we have to shape that up for them. Things like visuals, schedules, token economies can illustrate this, but the goal here is starting small and building. Token economies, systems like this are great for working towards delayed reinforcement. Schedules, which we've talked about, whether written, pictures, can show how much we have to do before we are done. And visuals, text, pictures, again, will work towards that delayed reinforcement. So let's put everything together. I'm only 2 minutes late. Look at that. We are going to identify behavioral challenges as a can't do or a won't do, and then implement strategies to solve that problem. For our can't do behaviors, we're going to build skills. We're going to add in supports or adjust the task. For our won't do's, we're going to add in or adjust reinforcement. So putting that all together, adding a lot of tools to your behavioral toolbox. So we are wrapping up our first hour, our can't do versus won't do session. My email, contact information is all in the slides. So if you have any additional questions that we didn't get to tonight, please feel free to reach out. I'd also love to invite you to follow us on any social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of the above at The Autism Helper, where we share lots of strategies like you heard tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my slides for our last portion of the evening. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, executive functions. And this is a really lovely complement to what we already talked about, and will really reiterate a lot of the strategies that we've already discussed. So more tools for your toolbox, more things that we can work on to build those skills. So unlocking secrets of executive functions. When we talked about can't do scenarios earlier tonight, and we talked about those missing skills that our kids have, very often they're missing those executive functioning skills. As we defined earlier in the evening, executive functioning skills are the cognitive processes required for goal-directed behavior. These are the skills to perform or execute a task. That definition always sticks with me, execute a task. Why are these skills so important? And why can I make this like sweeping generalization that like most of our kids are struggling with these if they're demonstrating negative behaviors? Deficits in executive functions can cause challenges in making and maintaining friendships, in following classroom and school rules, big implications in our academic skills, especially literacy. I'm super passionate about literacy and our reluctant readers. So really looking at the role executive functions play and our students' ability to read successfully is huge. And then our kids' impact on informalized and standardized assessments. There's a lot of implications that executive function deficits can have there. And I mean, I feel like we could all probably raise our hands if we said, do you have students or children that would struggle with some of these? Because these are such core, huge components of our kids' lives that they need to be successful in, right? Impact on reading. Let's touch on this for a minute. I absolutely love talking about literacy. There's just so little research and knowledge sharing on effective evidence-based practices for teaching students with autism and neurodiverse needs how to read. So that's one of the reasons that I'm super passionate about it. But when I learned about executive functioning skills, seeing how closely these are tied together, even if you look at something as simple as decoding requires very strong working memory and flexibility. Working memory is remembering what you know while doing something else. So when we see a lack of decoding, that snowballs to way bigger issues with literacy. When strong decoding doesn't happen, strong reading fluency doesn't happen. When strong reading fluency doesn't happen, strong reading comprehension doesn't happen. So what goes from a small problem snowballs to a kind of consistent, pervasive problem within reading. Even if your child has great decoding skills, comprehension, which is the goal of reading, requires a really high degree of working memory, right? You have to remember what you previously read. You have to remember what the character did in the previous chapter. You have to remember the context of the story, the plot line, in order to really understand a book. You have to also use a lot of metacognition, which is self-monitoring, and be flexible. We have to change our predictions. We have to change the tools that we're using and always be on alert for that. And as much as I could just really spend time talking about literacy and executive functions, we can equally devote that focus to math as well. Again, working memory, that ability to remember something while doing something else, is huge here. There's also a really strong connection between math skills and successes and impulse control. Impulse control is that response inhibition where we can inhibit and shift and check for errors. Metacognition again is at play. Any complex math really is going to require significant planning and organization. Where the decimal point goes matters. Where we align numbers matters. So if we struggle with planning and organization, we're going to kind of automatically be getting things wrong. And then major impacts on social skills. Social skills require huge amounts of impulse control, identification of potential consequences, and the ability to read cues. We do this all the time. If you said every thought that popped into your head out loud, you would have no friends. I promise you would have no friends, right? If you had no social filter, it'd be struggle. Think for a second, if your boss walked into your office tomorrow, walked into your classroom tomorrow, wherever you work, with a horrible haircut, horrible, mullet, frosted tips, a whole situation, right? And you'd probably want to be like, oh my God, that looks horrible. Why did you do that? But you would inhibit, you would think about those potential consequences and rephrase. You'd probably be like, oh, look at you. Different, sassy, right? Now, if it was your best friend, your brother, your sibling, your husband, your wife, your social filter is different. If they came back with their haircut, you'd be like, no, go back. They did you dirty. Go back. It's horrible. No way. Not living with you like that. The social filter is different because the context and that relationship is different. These are hard, high-level skills. Social skills requires so much flexibility. We have to constantly be shifting on what our expectations are versus what's really happening. I was sharing this example analogy at our lunchtime session today. Let's say you were going to go meet a friend for lunch on Saturday. You were looking forward to it all week. It's like a beautiful Chicago summer Saturday. You're going to go to a Mexican restaurant. You're going to sit outside, have tacos, maybe a margarita. It's going to be you haven't caught up with this friend in forever. It's going to be a great time. You show up at the restaurant. You see her sitting there. She's got her phone out, her brows furrowed, her head's down, her eyes are all red, her face is puffy. She's obviously been crying. Now, you're not going to approach that table and be like, hey, let's do it. It's a fun afternoon, right? That would be inappropriate. You would read the social cues and be flexible, right? Hey, what happened? Right? And you would shift. It might not be a fun girls' afternoon if her dog just died, right? So you're going to be flexible with that. With social skills, we also need to have really strong working memory. Working memory, man, it weaves its way into everything. Working memory is remembering what you know while doing something else. When I teach social skills groups, especially to my preteens, my high schoolers, we talk a lot about friend files. This is an important concept with establishing and maintaining relationships and conversations. We all have friend files in our head for everyone we know, where we put information we know about them, where they work, how many kids they have, what things they like, what things they don't like. And in order to form connections, have conversations, build relationships, we go to that file to figure out what to talk about, right? If someone told me that they like watching Bravo, next time I see them, I'm gonna be like, what'd you think of that New York City reunion? It was great, wasn't it? Now, if that's in my friend file for them, if in my friend file for them was like, hey, they think reality TV is stupid, I mean, they might be accurate, it is. I'm not gonna go bring that up to them, right? Think about maybe the secretary at the school that your child goes to or that you work at. You have a friend file for her. She has a college-age son. She loves cooking with loves cooking spicy recipes. She loves wearing high heels. When you walk in the morning, when you got to check in, you're like, hey, Linda, did your son come back for fall break? Oh, no, not yet. Maybe he's going to be here soon for Thanksgiving. I made the best recipe this weekend. You would love it. It has Serrano peppers in it. It was so spicy. I'm going to send it to you. That's how you build relationships with people, right? Have you ever been in a conversation with someone who's asked you like the same question like 5 times? Like, hey, where do your kids go to school again? And you're like, oh my God, I just told you. You're reading that as like they're rude, they're not listening, when really they just might struggle with working memory, right? So these are really big, important skills. We shared the 11 executive functioning skills earlier this evening. As we said, they're a part of our everyday life, and we use these skills every single day. So let's take an everyday errand and see how we use all 11 executive functioning skills in something as simple as grocery shopping. So let's go grocery shopping. So when we go grocery shopping, the very first step is we have to plan which store we're going to go to, right? You got to pick. Am I going to go to Mariano's? Am I going to go to Whole Foods? Am I going to go to Trader Joe's? Am I going to go to Aldi? Then we have to figure out what we need. That's all metacognition. What meals am I making this week? What am I out of? Right? What events do we have? We have to organize our list. Then we have to pick a time to go, and we'll have enough time to shop and get home using time management skills. So if we have to be somewhere at 7 o'clock, like we all did tonight, you're not going to go grocery shopping at 6:50, right? Then you have to leave for the store. Task initiation. This is my strugglesome one. We all have an executive functioning skill or two that just don't come that easily, right? This is mine. Once I get started, I'm good. It's just like getting started that's always hard for me. So we do it. We get up off the couch, we go, we leave for the store, we're at the parking lot, we're about to pull into a superstar parking spot, and it's like one of those deadly cold days where we don't want to be in the back of the parking lot, right? So we're about to pull in this superstar spot right front and center, and guess what? Someone swoops in front of you and steals your spot. And they saw you. You had your clicker on and everything. Now, you probably want to roll down your window and give them a piece of your mind, but like, you never know. It's not a safe choice always, and not worth raising your blood pressure. It's a small problem. You shake it off, you move on, use your emotional control, right? Next, while you're shopping, use working memory to identify the food you need. Here are the things in the produce section. Here's the things in the bakery and the dry goods. You use response inhibition to avoid indulging in things you don't need. Yes, Doritos are on sale, 10 for $10. But do you really need 10 bags of Doritos? No, right? Your response inhibition is lower when you're hungry. That's why they say don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. Then you adapt your list if things are missing using flexibility, and you make sure that you stay focused so you get home on time. You're not grocery shopping for 3 hours. That's sustained attention. The very last piece is putting all the groceries away when you get home. First, that's organization. If you buy 3 pints of ice cream and you put it in the pantry, you're going to be screwed the next day, right? It's all melted. You didn't organize properly. And then it's persistence. To me, persistence is that last 3%. If you go grocery shopping and then you leave all your food on the kitchen table and then you go to bed and wake up the next morning, did you really accomplish the goal of grocery shopping? I'm going to challenge you and say, no, you didn't, right? The goal of grocery shopping is to have food to eat during the week. And if you leave it all out, half of it's going to be ruined. Your lunch meat is questionable. Your milk is bad. I don't care what anyone says. You don't want to eat any of that, right? The frozen stuff, the fridge stuff. It's not good. Persistence is the last 3%. Maybe during virtual instruction, you had a child who struggled with persistence. They would do the work. They just wouldn't click submit on Google Classroom. And you need that last piece, that last 2%, right? So life skills, executive functions are essential life skills that all of our students need, and we can work on building these skills for all of our students that need it. With proficient executive functioning skills, individuals become more flexible, more independent, better problem solvers, better able to self-regulate and self-advocate. And really all students struggle with these skills. I do sessions on executive functioning skills for preschool through high school students, for gen ed and special ed, because so many kids are really struggling with these skills in both home and school. And COVID has such big implications on this. Kids missed out on so many core learning opportunities that would have built executive functioning skills. And it's really our role as the adults in our kids' lives to make up for that lost time by providing targeted instruction on these skills. So we want to work on executive functioning skills with all of your kids that need it, not assume that skills are mastered because of their age or grade. So how do we teach executive functioning skills? This is a big question and a big problem, but I'm going to give you the elevator pitch speech on how to do this, the big overview. And we've kind of already reviewed a few of these ideas. Big picture, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to teach the missing skill for success tomorrow, and we're going to adapt the environment for success today. Sounds familiar? It's what we talked about earlier, right? Add in those supports, but also provide that direct instruction. So new skills, supports to the environment. So first, we're going to teach the missing skills for success tomorrow. Executive functions are skills. Skills are behavior. Behaviors can be learned and strengthened. We learn executive functions through interactions with other people and our environment. Babies do not enter the world with a fully formed prefrontal cortex. That develops through childhood and adolescence, through interactions with people in the environment. That's how we learn and develop new skills. That's part of brain neurology, right? And we learn through this time and practice and purposeful instruction. Osmosis for executive functions do not work. Wishing and hoping that your learner is going to pick up on these skills. It's not going to happen, right? Sitting a super unorganized kid next to a super organized kid is not going to teach that unorganized kid how to be organized. So I want you to think for a second, remove the executive functions out of it, but think about how you just teach something new or how you learn something new, right? Let's think all the way back to how you either taught or learned addition. Depends how far back you want to think, right? Think about your own kids, think about yourself, maybe if you're an educator. How do we teach addition? When you teach addition, do you just have the child observe other people doing addition and that's it? No. Did you learn how to add in just one day? No, probably not. Did you work on addition in one grade and then never practice it again? No. When you made a mistake on addition, were you punished? Maybe, but it didn't teach you new skills, right? No, absolutely not. That's not how we learn new skills. We learn and teach through repetition and reinforcement. Frequent opportunities to practice. Reinforcement following correct responses, error correction following incorrect responses. We want to approach teaching executive functions with the same process, rigor, and attention to detail that you approach teaching academics. This should be purposeful and planned out. This is going to really, really mirror what we talked about earlier. Same idea. We're going to basically do that same process. Create a tool, teach it, fade it. You seeing a little pattern here? We want to create here an individualized checklist. A checklist is a really powerful visual strategy. Again, pictures, text that can scaffold and support and teach that skill. And then that second piece of fading the support is essential. The checklist can be a mini schedule. It can have pictures. It can have words. This could be simple or complex. This is for both you and the student. A checklist forces us to break down a step into smaller pieces. And in doing so, it forces us to really focus on each step as we teach it and not overwhelm the child trying to teach everything at once. So a checklist could be a set of rules on how to accomplish something. It could be an end of day written checklist. It could be a set of steps on how to do something like ask for a break. It could be a choice menu, like coping strategies here. I like this one. Anger is okay, but what should I do? It could be a set of steps on how to proofread or rules on how to behave in a group or an agenda for a time of day like the morning or circle time or morning meeting. So with our executive function plan, our first piece was teach that missing skill for success in the future. And the second piece is adapt the environment for success today. So we want both pieces to have a really robust program on how to build executive functioning skills. So the second piece, how do we adapt the environment? And again, this is going to really echo nicely what we talked about earlier. So the environment, and think for a second, big picture, step back, can be a tool that helps our child be successful, or it can be an obstacle that they have to overcome. I feel like it's our role as the adults in our kids' lives, parents and educators, to really, as much as possible, make the environment something that is supportive and helpful versus a distraction and an obstacle. Let's think for a second, you were asked to do something really difficult and effortful. For me, because I'm not a math person, guys, it would be long division. If you gave me like pages of long division, that would be effortful for me. And then let's say you gave me all this long division homework and you plopped me in the middle of Times Square in a distracting and overwhelming setting. I would have to spend most of my brain power drowning out the distractions of Times Square that I wouldn't have much left for the long division, right? And for some of our kids, the difficult thing that they are being asked to do every day are these executive functioning skills, task initiation, being flexible, having emotional control. It's hard. And if they're doing it in a distracting and overwhelming setting where they have to focus all their brain power on just overcoming that obstacle, there's not much left then for those executive functions. We want the environment to be a tool, and we want the things in the environment to have a point and a purpose. Schedules lead to more independence. Structure, routine leads to less distractions and anxiety. Visuals lead to less problem behaviors. Think about the why behind things. Some kids with executive function weaknesses will need more environmental support than those without. Thinking back to brain development, these individuals do not yet have the neurological capacity to accomplish these things, like, the physical capacity of me running a 7-minute mile. So instead, we're going to provide the support to help that child solve those skills. So the main ways we can do this when we think of the environment is the stuff and the people. We're a part of the environment. And we've really actually already talked about these before, which is great. We're really going to reinforce that previous session. So the big 3 ways we can change the way the environment looks. That's going to be with structure. That's going to be with strategic placement of things. That's going to be with distraction removal. And we can change the way the task or activity is presented, what we just talked about in our can't do, right? Then we can also change the way people interact with the child. We also talked about that before. Those are our clear verbal cues. That's saying what you mean. That's avoiding those rhetorical questions. When we can adjust these things, how the environment looks, how the task is presented, and how people interact, we can then scaffold and support that child to their current skill set with those executive functioning skills. All right, I wrapped up a few minutes earlier in this evening session. I was like really on it with my quick talking. I'd love to open the floor for any questions anyone has. My email, as I said, is also on the end of the slide. So if you don't feel comfortable dropping a question in the chat, please feel free to email me later. And I'm happy to discuss anything via email. Again, my website is on the last slide, theautismhelper.com. Please feel free to reach out on there on my email or any of our social media channels. And I just want to thank you all so much again for your attention this evening and your focus and dedication. I mean, the fact that parents show up to all of these amazing sessions that this series offers really says so much about, your role as educators and parents. So thank you all so much for having me.
Sasha, I have a question for you. What's the number one question that you get most often?
I'm going to do a generic fill in the blank. How do I stop my child from X, Y, and Z? And it's the same answer, no matter what's in there. Like, how do I stop my child from getting upset when we take it out of the iPad? How do I stop this child from being aggressive? And it's going to always be the same answer because it always comes back to that why. As a behavior analyst, looking at things from a function-based perspective is really important to me, and that gets so much more complex than there, but really figuring out why behaviors are happening and then what missing skill we can teach. I think a missing component with big picture with behavior plans is where's that replacement behavior? We decrease negative behaviors by increasing positive behaviors. So if we can figure out what that missing skill is, which is kind of what we talked about tonight, executive functions, then we can really see those, pretty drastic decreases in negative behaviors.
Last question. What's the biggest mistake parents make?
Oh gosh. I don't know how to even answer that. That feels like a loaded question there. I think mistakes is, and I'm guilty of this, like for myself as a parent. I feel like we try to do everything all the time. We're trying so hard. And in doing that, we're not letting our kids struggle and fail and run into problems. And it's not like a mistake. It's such a well-intentioned misstep maybe, but we're trying to do so much for our kids. And that's why I really focus on prompt fading in tonight's session, that we want our kids to make mistakes, to stumble, to struggle, because that's when we learn. And I think that we'll do our kids a big disservice if we overhelp, overprompt, not allow those naturally occurring problems to arise, because then when the problems do arise, when you're older, they're bigger and they're harder. And if we don't have that experience and that learning history, it's going to be that much harder. All right, good. I have a few minutes for questions before we wrap up. I so appreciate so many of you staying for the additional half hour here. Please feel free to drop a few questions in the chat. If I don't get to all of them, please feel free to email me later and I'm happy to answer them via email. So first question, what are some skills to teach when the child has trouble with transitions? Really hard to push pause on the video or transition to non-preferred tasks. I love talking about this question. In particular, I'm going to talk about YouTube with this first, and I'm going to go broader. A lot of kids struggle when turning YouTube off, or, Netflix or anything like that, but in particular YouTube with short videos. You want to really think about when is a natural pause in turning a tablet off, turning a tech device off, turning a game off. This is similar with games too. Sometimes we're like, okay, it's time for dinner, turn that off, let's go. And we're in the middle of a game, we're in the middle of a YouTube video. If we can find more natural pauses of like, hey, you have 3 minutes left in this, you have one more level in this, then let's turn it off. That can be really helpful with transitioning. In general, when struggling with transitions, this is kind of a combo of impulse control and task initiation. We want to give lots of warnings of when transitions will happen. And then when we're going from a preferred task to a non-preferred, we want to make sure we're not going super drastic from like the most favorite thing they've ever done to like the least favorite thing they've ever done, right? I don't want to turn off laying on the couch watching Real Housewives eating ice cream to go fold my laundry. It's going to be hard for me to do, right? So can we have like an intermediary expectation of, hey, we have to turn this off before we do this like lower tiered aversive task? Let's do something in between. So kind of scaffolding in that way. So those are a few things on transitionings. How can we help kids focus when they're easily distracted? How do we build that attention span and that attention skill? Really good question too. The main thing is first look at the environment. What distractions are available? We can manipulate the environment in so many good ways on removing potential distractions. And then it's really starting small with small, doable successes. Look at where you're starting. What's their current endurance with that skill? If it's homework, let's say, if the current endurance is 5-10 minutes, our expectations should not be sitting for 30 minutes. We're going to really struggle. So getting successes, giving confidence, getting those wins for them of, let's do 10 minutes of work, let's take a break, let's come back and do 10 minutes of work. I'd much rather have those shorter sessions that are successful than a longer session when nothing's getting done. And ensuring that, the work can be done at the start as well. All right, let's do one more question. How do you approach your child if they're struggling with executive functions, but not in a hurtful or insulting way, but saying that they're struggling? So I think you'll identify that the executive function piece is a struggle if you're seeing those missed opportunities, those not meeting classroom expectations. Think back to that slide we shared the very start of our session of how do we not meet at classroom expectations? Are we struggling with making friends? Do we have academic regression? Are we unable to work independently? That will be the clue that executive functions are an issue. If your kids are successful meeting those expectations, that means that they have sufficient executive functions to meet the demands that they are facing. So it's going to really manifest from those challenging behaviors that you're seeing. So I missed a few of your questions. Please feel free to email me. My email is on the slides. So please feel free to follow up via email. But thank you all so much for your attention in the middle of the day today. I so appreciate it.
Before you say goodbye, Sasha, I have 2 quick questions for you.
Yeah.
And this was outstanding in every single way, every second. And I'm so grateful to all the people who, no one left, Sasha, because of you. So that was outstanding. Is there a script, something we can tell those kids who are struggling and they think there's something wrong with them, it's causing anxiety? How can we relieve some of that?
I think a lot of what I kind of modeled in today's session is to really highlight that we all have different areas of strengths and weaknesses when it comes to executive functioning skills. I do this in my own parenting with my younger children all the time, but to highlight, hey, organization doesn't come naturally to me. To pay my bills, to do this, I set up reminders in my phone, and to highlight that these are hard skills. And I think the more our kids can kind of get retrospective on, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with this and this and this, that does lead to that spiral and that bigger anxiety piece. But the more we can normalize and globalize the challenges of executive functions and how we all utilize different supports, I think the easier that can be for our kids to recognize that this is something that we're all doing and that we're all always leveling up on. None of us are perfect in any of these. As our lives get more challenging and as our lives change, we have to constantly be reevaluating what supports we use and what skills we need practice on.
For the parent that couldn't be here this afternoon, what is one thought that you want them, that you wish that they missed today? One most important thought.
I think, is it a can't do or won't do? Every time you are frustrated with your child, every time you see a challenging behavior with your child, before you react, and it's easy to react, right? We want to respond, not react. Before you react, think, is this a missing skill? Is this a missing motivation? Because that will dictate the conversation you have. That will dictate the supports that you give. And if it is a missing skill and we're giving punitive consequences, that's not going to teach that missing skill, nor is it going to reinforce, really. I mean, punishment doesn't work. But we want to really highlight in our head, can't do or won't do. And it's an easy thing that can just be on the tip of your tongue and can really dictate then what conversations you're having with your child.
Perfect. Outstanding. Thank you so much. I already am looking at the calendar. I'm looking at the calendar when you can come back. You're outstanding.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. You all been great. Have a great rest of your day and hope Chicago warms up for us.
Thank you, Sasha. Have a great day, everybody. Hug the kids.